Crisis theory implications, strengths, and weaknesses. Group members for this project were Lauren Corbishley, Jamie Crocker, Delfina Romero, and Cynthia Snyder. So what is crisis? Taken from a quote from Creek-Lukton, crisis thus may be seen in combination of these situations: normal crisis with which the individual can or cannot cope, and situational crisis to which some may be able to adapt while others are overwhelmed. The situational crisis may be a response to a very common situation, for example, illness, or to a relatively unusual catastrophe. It's important to note that crisis can look different for anyone and everyone. Just because, say, a natural disaster happened, for some person it could be seen as a crisis, and to another person it could be seen as normal. Maybe they're used to hurricanes and it's just something else that they've gotten used to, therefore it's not really a crisis for them. What is crisis theory? Crisis theory is a framework that helps define and explain what occurs when someone experiences a problem they don't think can be solved. According to crisis theory, everyone is exposed to both internal and external stress, which is considered crisis. However, when individuals are not able to solve their problem, the stress increases, and this is when it's considered to be a crisis. Theorists explain crisis in different ways. According to Lindemann, they believe that because problem solving improved after experiencing a crisis, there must be opportunities of learning how to manage and survive crisis. Whereas Kaplan believed that crisis can be a normal development process as is not limited to unexpected events. He also believed that support from one's community is helpful in restoring homeostasis. Both Lindemann and Kaplan noted that crisis is temporary and is accompanied by a normal grief process. There are four main principles to crisis theory. Number one, crisis intervention is time limited and short term. Individuals experience a crisis are under extreme duress, and the immediate access to professionals will be able to help them identify solutions, coping skills, and allow the individual to regain back control of their emotions and help them to go back to homeostasis. Number two, engagement and assessment occurs simultaneously and efficiently. It is essential that clinicians who will be working with individuals and families have the skills to be able to help provide rapid and accurate assessment as quickly as possible. So making sure that you're engaged with the client or whomever is the one needing help is so important. As somebody who works in crisis intervention, I can tell you that is one of the main things that is just absolutely needed. Number three, a fundamental purpose of crisis intervention is to meet concrete and emotional needs through the provision of services. Many have realized that an efficient way to provide crisis services is ensure that services are in place prior to the need to have them. For example, many public health and community organizations have adopted a mindset of setting up services before the need of them arise. So example is public health will come out and say, to have disaster kits, 72-hour kits, have this much amount of water, and have this much amount of food in case of a hurricane, for example. And that is the way of helping with those needs before the crisis occurs. Number four, crisis intervention must move quickly, seeking to help a client return to previous level of functioning. First, we must recognize that those who have experienced a crisis would benefit from immediate intervention. Second, those who are actively experiencing a crisis are in state of vulnerability that may allow for changes to occur that ordinarily would not. Third, if an individual or family experience extreme emotions for a prolonged period of time, such as fear or anxiety, they may be at risk of developing prolonged or chronic diagnosis such as depression or PTSD. So where is crisis theory used? There are a number of different practice settings in which crisis theory is used, and I've just listed a few examples. Trust me when I say there is much more than this. Examples include hospitals, jails, client homes, schools, detox centers, outpatient mental health, and much more. I work in crisis intervention, and I can say that I respond out with law enforcement to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. And I get called out to homes quite a bit, middle of streets, grocery stores. Crisis can really happen anywhere where there is people. So who are in need of crisis intervention? This can be anybody from groups, individuals, families, community, organizational levels. And the crisis theory frequently serves victims of violence, victims of natural disasters, those who have lost loved ones, individuals separated from families, witnesses of tragedies. Crisis can be used with anybody, and a crisis really can be anything to anyone. So the question comes up with crisis theory if it is good in working with diverse client systems. So whether they're clients of different ages, cultural factors, gender factors, ethnic and racial factors. There was a study done with over 160,000 people over 5 years, and they indicated that the 36 program studies were at least competent at serving different cultures. So while we don't have the best research yet, we do know that at least of those 36 program studies, they were at least competent in helping the different racial and gender and ethnic and age factors of different diverse client systems. Strengths of crisis theory. An individual in crisis does not in itself reflect pathology. Other factors play a role, such as one's environment, which may contribute to their inability to return to the pre-crisis state of functioning. Individuals in crisis are more open to change than at other times due to being vulnerable and emotionally accessible. Not everyone can solve problems associated with crisis, but a social worker can assist allowing the individual to solve and address the problems presented. Everyone possesses mechanisms for coping with stress, which are inherent and causes a person to respond. When the stimulus is repeated, the impact fades, allowing the individual's problems to solve more effectively. We've talked about the strengths. Now, what are the weaknesses of crisis theory? Crisis theory doesn't take into account environmental factors, which may be an obstacle to problem solving. An individual can be in crisis and not show signs or know that he or she is in crisis, which conflicts with the view of crisis theories that anxiety reaches its highest point during the crisis. Crisis theory includes terminology that is often unclear, inconsistent, and contains practice uncertainties. Thank you so much for listening to our group presentation. Provided is a list of references that we used if you would like some more information. Thank you again.